In part one, we saw how Bob Kane defended libertarianism against a potential challenge in the luck principle, and he presented a few cases that were considered counterexamples to that principle. If you don't recall those, you might want to review part one before you go on. So he thinks that we've succeeded in showing the luck principle is actually false. So what next? Well, there is a challenge, a revision of the luck principle. The idea is that when looking at the counterexamples, such as the businesswoman trying to get to a meeting on time and trying to help someone who was a victim of an assault, or a person trying to solve a math problem but very distracted, an assassin who may have an arm twitch and fail to succeed but actually does, or a husband who tries to smash a table, a glass table. All right, so those are the kinds of cases. And think of the latter three especially. If the agent succeeds, so let's use the husband example, the hand breaks the table, it might make sense to say that the person is morally responsible. But if they fail, it seems that that wasn't their intent. And so it seems to be by chance or by accident. And so even though the previous cases were successful as counterexamples to the luck principle, they leave room for this possible revision of the luck principle. So here's the revised luck principle. And again, we'll make sure that we have all the words there on the screen to quote from Kane to get this, since it's a technical principle, we want to get this right. If it is undetermined at a time t, whether an agent voluntarily and intentionally does A at t, or voluntarily and intentionally does otherwise, then the agent's doing A rather than otherwise at t would be a matter of chance or luck. And so this could not be a free and responsible action. So the idea is now, what about these situations? It doesn't seem to be the intent of the person. And so to fail, right? The assassin who fails, the husband who fails to break the table, the person who fails to do the math problem. And so it seems like we have this LP revised that is going to be problematic. So Alfred Mele develops a criticism that is based on the revised luck principle. And let's think through how this works. The idea is that in the actual world, P voluntarily and intentionally does A at T. So we'll take the case of the businesswoman who voluntarily and intentionally stopped to help the person who was a victim of an assault, knowing she's going to be late for this important meeting. Now, the way it was set up, there's going to be a nearby possible world, which is the same as the actual world up to time t, where P star, a counterpart of the businesswoman, voluntarily and intentionally does B at t. In that world, that nearby possible world, this woman goes to the meeting, gets to the meeting on time. But then there's nothing about the agent prior to T that explains the difference in the choices in the two possible worlds. There's nothing about the agent's powers or capacities to act, her state of mind, the character that she has, her disposition, her motives to succeed in business and to be a good person and help others. All of that's the same prior to T. And so you can't use that to explain the difference in what she did. And it's therefore a matter of luck or chance that P voluntarily and intentionally does A at T, helps the victim of the assault, and P star voluntarily and intentionally does B at T, goes to the meeting on time out of selfish motives. So P, therefore, the woman who stopped to help the person is not responsible for voluntarily and intentionally doing that at T. And then, of course, presumably, we shouldn't fault P star for going to the meeting instead. And so we shouldn't blame P star. You shouldn't give credit to P. That both are businesswomen, right? We're talking about in the actual world versus her in the nearby possible world. And Kane responds, of course, that this revised principle fails, and he provides a different example. He says, okay, look, here's the situation. We have someone who's trying to complete two deliberative tasks that are competing with one another. So one's from self-interest, one's from moral interest. So this is comparable to the businesswoman situation. Now, there's internal indeterminism that's thwarting both tasks, right? The indeterminism is internal. It's not something from outside that's causing a problem, but there's this tension within the person. But success in either task just is success in what she was trying to do. So take the businesswoman again. She succeeds in helping the person that is a victim of assault. Whatever choice she makes that choice. That's one she was trying to do. And so she has success in doing so. And the indeterminism that there does not imply it was involuntary, right? That doesn't mean she didn't want to do it or try to do it. Now, since we know that the brain is structured like a parallel processor, right? We can work on two tasks at the same time, not always overtly consciously, but we can do that. Our structure, the neural structure of our brain is such that we are parallel processors. We have these parallel processors, however you want to put it. So it seems like case 4 is possible because of that. So Kane refers to the physiology there in order to support that possibility. And these are cases where one is of two minds, as we put it, where you're feeling that tension. You want to do one thing and you also want to do something else. And you're sorting through it, and you do want to succeed in both directions. And it seems like the indeterminism then is fused with the effort to overcome temptation. That's where the indeterminism is. So the initiator of the action owns the outcome. Okay, regardless of which outcome occurs, the businesswoman owns the result. And just like the husband, who, if being honest, doesn't say, this just happened to me that I broke the table, but rather I did it, right? Even though chance was involved, even though there was indeterminism. So in the context of the argument for the revised luck principle, both P and P star do something that is voluntarily, and it's intentionally done. And so they seem to be responsible for what they've done. They ought to be held responsible for what they've done. Now, let's push this a little more. Let's consider how Mele might respond to what Kane has to say up to this point. P and P star made the same efforts. So how can you say it's not a matter of chance, right? It had to be a matter of chance when they're making the same effort, but they had different results, right? And in the case of the husband, right? The same, but Kane's response, right? He said, wait a minute, well, let's think about that case of the husband. The same efforts were made in the husband who broke the table, and that person's still responsible. So if we have the husband in the actual world wants to break the table, but it's indeterminate whether he will succeed or not, breaks the table, in the nearby possible world, the counterpart of the husband does not break the table, the husband is still responsible, right? Just it doesn't matter that it's possible that the table didn't break when he put his hand down. The husband's still responsible. And since this fourth case, the case, we're really kind of going back to the businesswoman case when we're talking about case 4. It involves the businesswoman, P and P star. They're both succeeding in what they were trying to do. They endorse the outcome that occurred. So how could we not hold them responsible? The woman who succeeds in getting to the meeting on time, demonstrating she's a responsible person, succeeding in business, right? She endorsed the action. She's successful. How could we not hold her responsible? Right? And then on the flip side too, of course. Now, again, let's press it from Mele's point of view again. The indeterminism here seems to imply a lack of control, and without control, there's no freedom or responsibility. Again, this is somewhat appealing back to the intuition of the luck principle. Now, Kane agrees that the indeterminism is a hindrance that diminishes the person's control. So he actually agrees with that part of the intuition. When you have indeterminism, it does produce a hindrance to what the person's trying to do, and that does diminish a person's control. But wait a minute, let's think about how she's hindered in this case of the businesswoman. It's from her self-interested action versus her morally motivated one to help the victim of assault. Those are the internal hindrances. It's not a hindrance from an external source. And so we should go on to say that in case 4, she has plural voluntary control. She has the ability to bring about whichever of 2 options one wants when she wills to do it. She is able to succeed in helping the stranger. She's able to succeed in getting to the business meeting on time. And this is not some kind of antecedent determining control, right? That's not going on. We don't have a deterministic world. So there isn't any prior sufficient condition to get the result of the self-forming action. There's no deterministic chain that leads to the woman helping the victim of assault, or that leads to ignoring her and going on to a business meeting. And so Kane kind of sums it up by saying, look, does one need to be able to explain the difference for P between doing A and doing B? And he says, no, you don't have to provide an explanation of the difference, why the person did one rather than the other, right? And an absence of an explanation does not imply, it doesn't imply that P and P star, for that matter, did not choose. They both chose. It doesn't imply they chose as a result of effort, for reasons, when they chose, and knowingly and purposefully, rationally, voluntarily, and intentionally chose, right? It doesn't imply that any of these things are lacking. Or to put it positively, we still have an explanation of an action in which P chose as a result of effort for reasons. When she made the decision, it was knowingly and purposefully. It was a rational choice done voluntarily and intentionally. And so she should be held responsible. And likewise, so should P star. So you can choose responsibly for prior reasons that weren't conclusive, that weren't deterministically deciding the outcome. They weren't decisive prior to your choosing for them. And so self-forming actions can be considered value experiments. This is another way of thinking about these cases that Kane has described: the businesswoman, the assassin, the person working on a math problem, the husband. These are cases of value experiments where the individuals are kind of authors, like they're similar to authors directing the characters at a certain indeterminate point in the plot. So it's like you're writing a book, and maybe you even as an author don't know which direction the character is going to go. Certainly as a reader, you don't know that. Character makes a decision, goes one way, and the plot develops from that point. Only in this case, obviously, we are ourselves in the process of self-forming actions. We are the authors, right? We're directing what's going on within us, the real self that we have. And these self-forming actions over time will determine our character. And then Kane allows for the fact that possibly down the road, some point, there is a decision or a task, or let's say the businesswoman is faced with another case where she is self-interested option and an option to help someone, but she's developed the character of being self-sacrificing and helping other people. So maybe in that case, it's determined that she's doing it. She's no longer really attracted to the selfish action. It's determined that she's going to help the person. But that's because of a prior self-forming action, or probably a series of prior self-forming actions that develop the character she has. And Kane says those are necessary in order for one to be responsible. You have to have that indeterminism. And so the view of libertarianism and that requirement and moral responsibility is upheld by Kane.